Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV, a show for loyalty marketing professionals. I'm Paula Thomas, the founder and CEO of Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV, where we feature insightful conversations with loyalty professionals from the world's leading brands. Today's episode is hosted by Charlie Hills, Chief Strategy Officer of Mando Connect, a UK-based agency that uses smart data to create brilliant partnerships and rewards that really work. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Loyalty. As Paula mentioned, I'm Charlie Hills, the Chief Strategy Officer of Mando Connect. In this episode, I am delighted to interview Kate Wheaton, the Head of Strategy for Ogilvy One. Through her long career, Kate has worked on some of the UK's most effective and loved loyalty programmes for brands such as Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Boots, Vodafone, British Airways, Waterstones and Pets at Home. She enjoys the combination of strategic rigour and creativity that modern loyalty demands to be so successful. Today, we're going to be learning about her favourite book and loyalty programmes, highlights and key learnings from the programmes she's worked on, and all about the new loyalty white paper from Ogilvy One called Loyalty in the Age of the Emotional Consumer. I really hope you enjoy our conversation today. So hello and welcome to the podcast today. I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show.
I'm really happy to be here, Charlie. It's a great pleasure.
Oh, it's so cool. And it's such a great piece of research that we're going to talk about today and some brilliant programs that you've worked on. But before we get into all of that, I've got to start off with Paula's favourite question. And it's a new one for 2025. So it still feels really funny asking it. But before we get into the world of just loyalty, what's your favourite book on life, leadership or loyalty, Kate?
I'm going to be a bit boring and I actually picked the loyalty one, so more of a kind of work-oriented
one. On topic, we love it. That's great.
And it's a book I and certainly some of my colleagues have referred to a lot in sort of shaping our thinking about loyalty, and it's The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And I think it's sort of very simply, but quite efficiently makes the case that loyalty in its sort of many senses of the word is really built through what a brand does at particular moments, really kind of key opportunities where a brand has to create disproportional impact. And they make the case, obviously, that builds incredibly strong memory structures and therefore very strong emotional sort of enduring bonds to a brand. I think what I like about the book, obviously the general premise I think is really important, but it's really practical and it sort of gives you, firstly it sort of defines what those opportunities are in a very lucid way that you kind of start to thinking about whatever brand or category you're operating in, where might those moments be across the customer's experience through their whole life cycle potentially with you. And then it really decodes how you brands can effectively respond to them. So it's like a total primer and incredibly useful on that basis, I think. I love a kind of business book that gives you very practical things to use afterwards. It's great investment in time. And I think that book in particular is really relevant to the sort of the findings from the study that we made, which is really about how brands need to really cultivate that emotional impact, appealing to the heart, not just to the head. And I think the important thing there is it's both. It's not just one or the other. You kind of need to do both.
Oh, that's nice. And that's a lovely segue from the kind of the book into the research that we're going to talk about. And we're building such a brilliant library recommendation through this question, actually. It's fantastic. And I've seen you use that book actually in client work as well. So it's really lovely to see. I'm all about actionable insight. And I love that actually you've got that theory and that it's translated into practice. So yeah, one I highly, highly recommend. Which brings us on nicely to your favourite loyalty programme. I know you've worked on many, many programmes over your career. Any stood out or any you haven't worked on that are your kind of favourites, and why?
I'm picking one particular one, but for two reasons, and only past for programmes. So I've worked recently on Nectar with Sainsbury's. I've worked with them in the past as well. So I've had a couple of bites of that particular cherry. But I think in light of what we just talked about, the importance of emotional impact, I particularly like a thing Nectar do, which is called the Grapefruit and Veg Challenge. Now, they only run it once a year, but for a period of time. But I think what it does is, Nectar's it's very typical supermarket loyalty program. Everyone knows it. It's effective at what it does. But I think what the Great Fruit and Veg Challenge does very effectively, and in a way that is sort of slightly more elevated than the general Nectar program, is that it sort of rewards you for being a good human.
Yeah.
For once, it's about being more healthy, for thinking about yourself and how you're feeding your family. And I think that in itself does create a sort of sense of virtue and sort of fulfillment and achievement that ticks all of those emotional boxes I've been talking about. It's a mistake to think that emotional things are only created out of gifts or surprise and delight and things. Those are going to be lovely, but there are lots of emotional sort of buttons that you can press with consumers. And I think everything from sort of mastery to achievement are all really important. And I think what Nectar have also done well is actually make the experience itself, so that the interaction you have with the program via the app it's quite fun. It's a little bit more gamified. It uses fun graphics. It's got a kind of challenge element to it, so you're always trying to do a little bit more. And fundamentally it rewards you with Nectar points, but again, that fits with your familiar kind of the things you have familiar already absorbed. So I do think that's a nice example of a little way of building some of those emotional peaks into people's experience. And I think that's a good one. So that's the one I was going to pick.
And it's a great moment as well, linked to the book. I think it is. It's a really lovely example of a loyalty program, and building a proposition within the program, owning it, and then repeating it and improving it every year.
And also, I'm passionate about health and eating well and that sort of thing. So it happens to work for me. So it is a personal delight. I get quite a kick out of, God, I eat a lot of fruit and vegetables. I'm so good, a little halo.
Very important, very important. Yeah. And from my point of view, I really like as well that it's got that challenge culture to it as well, and that they're innovating it every year, and they're bringing it on, and they make it a little bit better. And we've seen nearly all the big programs bring that in, and that was one of the first, I think, to start to build the proposition. So no, that's a brilliant answer, and really nice to see a big kind of iconic program inventing something new as well. Sometimes I think we forget that the big players can do that big invention as well. We're always looking to the
very much so.
alternative ones. So it's a great example.
I think it's also just an example that what you do in a program, obviously there need to be some fixed elements that are long term and enduring, but I think brands need to have, and this is obviously something we found in the study, that brands need to have confidence to have some fun with the program, and if that's appropriate. Obviously, it's not for everything, but to be prepared to try new things. And they don't have to be things you sort of commit to forever. Consumers are very adept at assimilating things and then moving on. That's what we do it all the time. We're a very adaptive species. And so I kind of go, we should do more of this. And again, this is something that came up in the study we did, that the importance of constantly fueling a program with fresh new things is quite important.
Yeah, I think that's really key as well, particularly in the British market, because everyone's so savvy in Britain, aren't they, about what loyalty programs are up to, and they can compare one grocery program to another grocery program. So I think that's really key. I mean, you've worked in loyalty marketing for a long time. You've worked on some of the biggest programs that I think any one of us have ever heard of in Britain, across, so many different sectors. I'm sure our audience probably don't know your bio as well as I do. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background in loyalty marketing and what you particularly enjoy about it? What's kept you here?
Well, I was lucky enough to sort of start my career proper at EHS, which of course was, as I always remind people, the place where Clubcard was actually invented.
Really?
Yes, yeah. We took it first to I didn't. The team, Terry Hunt, those guys took it to, I think, Sainsbury's first, who dismissed it and said, we don't want that. That's just Green Shield stamps all over again electronically. And then they took it to Tesco, and then dunnhumby were kind of brought on board and obviously brought the acceleration into the program that it really needed. But I remember stuffing envelopes when in the office for the 12-store pilot that we did initially. So that was absolutely ages ago. But I didn't actually work on Clubcard until later on. But I started my career at EHS, where because of Clubcard, we built a strong reputation for understanding loyalty, having a particular view on it, which was very successful and really the success of the agency was predicated for a period of time on the sort of learnings and reputation that was created through Clubcard. Then I moved to TMW Unlimited, which was an independent at the time, so slightly different. Obviously, EHS has become Havas now. It was always owned by Havas, as is now. And then I came to Ogilvy. So that I've only really worked in 3 places over a very long period of time. I know. I'm very loyal.
3, right? What 3?
I practice what I preach, which is that I'm a bit of a sort of, I like to see things through, and I like to build teams and kind of, create something that kind of that lasts really.
And when you really know your stuff as well, I think that really shows in all the project work that we've ever done with, that depth of brand insight, but also that depth of kind of sector and industry insight as well. What about all those programs you've worked on? You've dropped a few names as you've gone through, but please tell us about the best ones or the worst ones.
Well, I couldn't possibly drop anyone in it. I think picking up on the second part of your question, what I really like about loyalty is it's one place where creativity and deep numeracy and business thinking need to come together, and in a very immediate way. You're really looking at direct impact on sort of behaviour as well as longer term metrics, and business casing and that kind of thing. But it's one of the few places where you really see the full gamut of what strategists like us. So, yes, understanding loyalty, but also understanding brands, understanding customers, understanding technology and data. All of those things have to come together effectively to deliver a good modern loyalty program, effective modern loyalty program. Gosh, the programs, I did have to have a think about this because it goes back a long way. So in retail, sort of big retail, I've worked on Nectar, Tesco, Clubcard, Boots Advantage for a period of time, Morrison's, Morecard, and currently Pets at Home. So the big 5, I'd like to think. Specialist retail, I did some work years ago for Waterstones. That program still exists, I'm very proud to say. Not quite in the same way that we created it, but
I
it's
love
still
that
there.
program. I've got 2 teenage boys, and we've got a Waterstones, and I love going in. I buy my books there rather than Amazon because of that program. It's fantastic.
And I've done a little bit of work in fashion, which I'll touch on later. Gosh, many moons ago, and then sort of more recently Vodafone. So when they first went into loyalty years ago, partnering with Air Miles, oddly enough, and then later, obviously, the partnership we did with you guys on Very Me program. I've done a little bit in financial services, so AA, Compare the Market, and a little bit in travel, IHG, BA, and things like that. So a really broad range, but my really deep experience is in retail, to be quite honest. And I think, beyond that, I've done a lot of work with brands where, if you like, loyalty is the desired outcome, but it's not about a program. It's about products or experience or just general strategies that deliver high levels of retention and brand preference. So, a program is not the answer to everything. It's a good answer to lots of things, but it depends where you're at as a brand and as business.
And I think that's what's so wonderful, and why I really enjoy working with Ogilvy and Ogilvy One on these types of projects, because there is that recognition that loyalty is more than a program. I think sometimes the platform providers or particular suppliers can take a kind of very narrow view of what loyalty is. And, that to a lot of people, loyalty is a points program. So even, changing up that mechanic can be, kind of redefining in terms of the definition of it. So I think it's really important. I think the industry's catching up, actually. I think people recognize that it is more than the program. It's how you activate it, but also your brand experience. Do any of the programs that you've worked on really sort of stand out for you? Any that you think, wow, that one really sets it apart from the rest, and everyone should learn this from this program?
I think Tesco Clubcard. I worked on Clubcard back in the late 2000s for about 5 years. And I think what Tesco have is that absolute willingness to evolve and to innovate. And the sort of what I found at that time, and I hope it's the same now, it probably is that the kind of the knowledge, the depth of knowledge, and that Clubcard gave them, through the data and the insight that came with it, really fueled their understanding of the customer, and it enabled them to sort of create an entire sort of language around the customer that the whole business used and understood, which gave them really strong focus and an ability to sort of knit things together really meaningfully. And I think the other thing that I really admired about Tesco was about their decision making. I remember back in sort of 2009, probably 2008, 2009, around the big financial crash where there was a lot of impact on people's ability to spend, affordability all changed. And at the time, there was a sort of very quick focus around, right, what can we do to lessen the burden on customers, but also to improve their loyalty to our business, so we retain more of them and continue to grow their value to us. And very swiftly, you sort of look at lots of scenarios, but so fast they just got to the view that the thing that was going to have the biggest impact and the biggest reach, they weren't scared. That's my point. They weren't like, let's tiptoe into this. They were like, what's going to have the biggest impact? Double points, right? We will double the value. That's a big investment for them.
Yeah.
It's not a little thing to do, big investment, but they were really confident that it would pay back. And they made the decision so fast to do that. Back then, they obviously have now bought it back again. I think, again, there's that sort of view that actually we really want to impact our customers quickly. This is what the sort of big change we need to make. Of course, they were the first to do club pricing, not universally. It's been done in lots of other countries beforehand. But I think they have that sort of instinct about what's going to work and what's going to work for customers. They do a lot of research as well, so it's well informed, and they have a lot of data. So, it's not guesswork, but I think they don't overburden themselves with fear about things.
They go all in. I always think that whenever we're looking, we do a lot of market reviews in the engine room at Mando, and we're always looking at what programs are doing. And I think one of my observations is that while others test, pilot, tweak, sort of dip their toe in the water, Tesco's are always the one that go all out. They've got their Clubcard Plus, and it worked really well. They launched member pricing, and you can't, turn around in the store without seeing it. I really admire it. They've launched Tesco Clubcard Challenges. One of the first things they were actually slightly behind the market on, but then they've brought that Tesco flavour to it, and they've done it really effectively with the kind of wrap-ups and things. So I think they are always one to admire. We quite often talk to our clients as well, like, if it works for Tesco's, it's worth investigating for you, because I think that's we know the rigour of their decision making, but interesting to learn about their speed and their bravery as well.
I don't know if it's the same now. Certainly back when I worked on it, they did a lot of evaluation and lots of sort of digging deep into, I remember doing a big piece with dunnhumby on, the economics and performance of Clubcard. And that wasn't a small piece of work. It was quite a deep thing. And I know they'd done that before. But actually, I think once they've worked things out, they tend to move quite quickly. I mean, I think the other example I'd like to draw on is really about how brands can dial up their distinctiveness. And I think I did some work 2 years ago on a fashion brand, quite high fashion designer brand, really well known for its sort of iconic imagery and sort of quite out there sort of stance on things. And they were looking at the development of a program. So we were involved in the sort of development of that proposition and what it could look like. And we did some research with consumers who were heavily into fashion. We called them tastemakers, because not only are they heavily into fashion, they're the ones that also influence other people.
Yeah.
So, we went to one of the usual sort of gamut of potential benefits we could offer and everything, all sorts of things, from the most basic sort of discounts and that sort of thing, through to quite interesting things from going back into their archive and remaking things and that sort of stuff. But we missed one really important thing, and it was more of a co-creation kind of workshop type research. And what we completely missed was that all of the people who are going to be influential to others are now creators. And what they really liked about that brand was that what they wanted from that brand was to understand and learn the skills of how you make iconic imagery and film.
Oh, wow.
So actually, the best possible thing we could offer them was the chance to come on a shoot, or the chance to be with a stylist, or the chance to work with a photographer, or to see an advert being made. And now I sort of say it's like bloody
Yeah,
obvious. It's
yeah.
completely obvious, right? But
But at
at
the
the
time,
time, and it just showed me, rather than dig into always the well of loyalty type program type thinking, you also need to dig into the brand and what it stands for, and therefore what it could open up for you, rather than the usual stuff that you kind of run through. So for me, that was a really interesting sort of. I mean, I think the learning of skills is quite an interesting area. I know sort of Samson have done some stuff about that with
yeah,
photography. Obviously, Sephora do it quite a lot with beauty and using makeup. And I kind of feel there are pockets of that sort of thing
yeah.
happening. I think it's really interesting, particularly for that Gen Z audience who are all about the skills acquisition and making and creating. So I think that
Well,
was
I
a
love
nice
that
thing.
example on so many levels.
Yeah.
I know the fashion brand you're talking about, but
Yeah.
obviously I'm not going to reveal who
No,
it is.
please, no,
But it's that was such a fantastic project to
mm.
watch, in development from the sidelines. And then yeah, exactly, that kind of skill development and being really true to the brand is really key. I'd
Hadn't
also
crossed my
recommend checking
mind.
out Canon Club as well, who have a very
Oh
similar kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
brand
yeah.
appropriate, only Canon could type
Yeah,
development.
yeah.
That's an awesome example. Are there any other sort of big innovations you've seen recently, or anything else that you really sort of stands out or that you've really admired? And then we
I
will
quite,
get on to talk about the research, I promise, for everyone
yeah, I
who's
think
listening.
two brands I think do a really good job. H&M, I love
Yep.
the way they've sort of broken down behavior into lots of different things. So you get rewarded for lots of different things
Yeah.
across, everything from recycling through to whatever liking. And I think that sounds really easy to do. It's actually quite hard to do. So
Yeah, it is,
um,
especially across the number of markets they've
yeah,
got and
yeah,
however many hundreds of millions of members they've now
yeah.
got globally.
So good for them. And the other example is a bit different. I think Amex are really clever. I mean, they sort of, I think with their rewards program specifically, they dug into the brand initially and they thought very much it's about elevated experience. We're Amex, we're exclusive, we make things more premium. And so I think they always did really well on those sort of extraordinary experiences around travel and, all sorts of things that
Yeah.
they could offer people. But I think in the pandemic and cost of living crisis specifically, they really shifted the needle and kind of went, and we actually have to really double down on how people can use their
Yeah.
points on a day-to-day basis, which is not rocket science at all. But I just think they've been so smart in the way they've done it with pay with points. I can't remember they part pay. You can backdate it from your Amex bill. The Amazon pay with Amex points. I mean, they've completely dug into the sort of whole ecosystem of
Yeah.
how you might use your points on a day-to-day basis and done it incredibly well. So credit to them. I think they've recognized that emotional and rational things have to be delivered, and the speed with which they got there, as the climate changed, obviously, it was admirable that
Yeah.
they've really done well
Well,
in
they've
that.
really avoided the pitfall of the hotel and airline industry, which
Yeah,
was held
yeah,
up for years as, the icon of kind of
yeah,
loyalty programs. And the big problem there is obviously lifestyles have
yeah,
changed, patterns
yeah,
have changed, and now people can't engage or use their
yeah,
points in the way they always used to. So yeah, that's a
yeah,
really good example of
yeah,
them being ahead, whereas some others have been behind. Although we're all looking
yeah.
forward to seeing what happens now that BA have made all those big changes in their
Oh well,
programs.
yeah,
Yeah, that's going to be a controversial one, but we
yeah.
won't get into that now. One of the big things, Ogilvy's famous for is thought leadership. And I think, I remember almost growing up reading Ogilvy thought leadership and about
Mhm.
bonds in loyalty and some really kind of brilliant thinking that's come out of the agency. So it was really exciting this year to see a white paper come out. And I'm going to make sure I get the title right. The new white paper is called Loyalty in the Age of the Emotional Consumer. And before we get into the contents of the paper, it'd
Mhm.
be really interesting, what prompted this? It's been a while since Ogilvy's published it.
Yeah.
Prompted it, and what sort of method did you take to it? Because I think it was quite a different approach.
I think the sort of simple answer is we were relaunching Ogilvy One
Yep.
with CRM loyalty as a sort of key part of the offering, and we wanted to draw attention to it. So we thought that actually, loyalty is a mature category now. Having a program is no guarantee of success. I mean, it used to be that you could probably get so far on just having a program to give you a
Yeah.
little bit of competitive advantage. But if that's table stakes, I think you really have to think a bit harder about how you're leveraging that and the kind of impact it's having. So we thought it was a good time to go back into that to understand what was driving, you know, what was driving things, what was shaping what the future of loyalty is going to look like. And we decided to talk to practitioners on the basis that they are also close to consumers, their customers in particular,
Yeah.
and kind of have really understood what they're looking for and are a good reflection of that. So, and I think sometimes with practitioners, you also get the business view, and
Yeah.
some of the learnings I think are sometimes more useful to other practitioners. For us, this was very much, there's a lot of information out there about how consumers feel about loyalty. I mean, Mando, you guys do a great report every year, which we shamelessly use with our clients. Of course
Love
we
it.
do.
Feel free.
And that does a good job, I think, of covering a lot of a general barometer of how consumers are feeling about loyalty programs. But I think sometimes for practitioners and potential kind of people that are thinking about going into the loyalty, thinking about whether their program needs to, change or evolve, be rebooted, whatever it is, it's nice to hear from other experts like you
Yeah.
and to know what's keeping them awake, and also to get that sense of like, we're not alone.
Yeah.
We are a community. I know we don't always behave like it, but I think it's important to recognize that it is a relatively small bunch of people
Yeah.
who have got these sort of experience and skills and interest in loyalty, and that we wanted to kind of celebrate that and make something that sort of put them at the heart of it, and gave them a bit of a forum and a platform to sort of share their thinking with.
Well, I can also see why you really enjoyed working on it. It's back to that point about the intersection of where business meets consumer meets
Yeah,
technology. And
yeah.
I think the practitioner's point of view is so important, actually, in how you pull that all together. And it really comes out of the report, actually. And I love all the kind of quotes and call outs from real people running programs. I'm a big fan of loyalty training and loyalty conferences, and actually getting together with like-minded peers and sharing challenges from one sector to another. It never ceases
Nerding
to
out on
surprise me.
things.
Yeah, but like how, the fuel sector can learn so much from the people running coffee programs, and the beauty sector can learn so much from retail. I always think that's one of my favorite bits as well.
Well, I always come back to the heart of it. It's just humans, right?
Yeah.
It's just human customers doing things, and
Yeah.
I think we sort of forget that sometimes. We let the category stuff and the kind of norms and sort of things that we're familiar with in that category kind of occlude our understanding of at the heart of it. It's just people, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I've been so excited to watch what's happened in the restaurant and cafe sector over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, because it almost started from scratch. There wasn't, there was the coffee shop sort of
Mm,
stamp card mechanic, but nothing else really. And then when you look at the innovation in that sector and like the
yeah,
explosion, it genuinely looks like they've sort of picked all the best bits of all the different sort of other sectors and
yeah,
put them
yeah,
together and then made them unique to them.
yeah,
So yeah, no, that's great.
yeah.
You talk about four pathways. So I'm gonna read this to make sure I get it right. So data without understanding is noise. Loyalty requires courage and commitment, adapting through creativity and innovation, and the power of the collective. So four really kind of cool, very Ogilvy-esque kind of chapters within the report. I can imagine how other agencies might have addressed that. And actually, I love
Yeah.
this kind of there's a big kind of conceptual thoughts from Ogilvy, and then there's in the report there's obviously so much evidence behind each of them. But what do you think the sort of the highlights are of each of the four? Is there anything you think our listeners would be like, wow, that's the bit to really focus on?
I think, overall, I mean, it is called loyalty in the age of the emotional consumer. And I think that is really about the need to build beyond functional benefits and experiences. Those are often foundational and often the reason someone joins a program. But I think very quickly there is a need to building things that are more memorable, more about making people feel things, and really digging into that area so that you can be much more effective in what you do. And I think with the pathways, The thing about data is really acknowledging that clients need to absolutely double down on the capability to analyze and make, turn that data into things that can inform and shape communications, benefits, experiences, whatever it is. And that is about having both the right talent, the right number of people, the scalable resource that you need, the scalable resource you need, and the technology, which does include AI, of course. But there are, without the human, you are going to get lost. And I think those two things together, the human working with the right technology, is obviously at the heart of that. Loyalty requires courage and commitment. I don't think anyone operating in the world of loyalty would be surprised by that. But I think it's worth saying, for many years, loyalty felt like it was a siloed outpost that wasn't really at the heart of what a business's marketing effort, let alone the total business. And I think it has sort of, in some instances, not all, but I think where it's most successful, it has been brought more into the heart of the business. It is viewed as a long-term endeavour that is it's a cross-business endeavour. So multifunctional teams need to deliver across multiple parts of the business. Where are things going to kind of be most felt? And I think the big players, your Tesco's, your Nectars, those guys have been the ones that have sort of trailblazed in showing that certainly Clubcard and Nectar actually can be like a glue that takes just sort of quite disparate parts of your business, banking, mobile, blah, 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 and can start to knit it together for the customer and give them another reason. It's not going to be the main reason. There's going to be lots of reasons someone might choose Tesco Mobile or Sainsbury's Bank, but it becomes another reason to choose that just gives you a little bit of advantage to deploy. And I think the thing about courage is that point I made earlier about the need to be distinctive and to dig into your brand and find something that, the last thing consumers need is another Me Too program. Really, there are lots of programs out there. It just won't make any difference. So you could be expending cost on something that doesn't actually ever fulfill its
and cut through, I think, as well, is so important. I mean, we know the average Brit is, a member of 6 programs, and to get into that, that sweet spot of 6, you've really got to have something quite special in terms of your brand relationship, but also what you offer. I completely agree.
Which I think then takes us into the third point, which was about adapting through creativity and innovation. And I think too many programs become so habitual that whilst the customer may be behaving a certain way, it's back of mind and it's no longer changing their behavior. Now, most clients nowadays don't get into loyalty purely to reward retrospective behavior, staying. They actually want it to be a platform to drive future growth and to grow the customer's sort of value to them as a business. And I think to do that, you have to be prepared to keep things fresh, to bring in new things, to excite customers, to keep them interested. I think that's the core thing, and to give them, things that sort of genuinely can recharge their behaviour and move them on in a different way.
And I think that's such a shift, isn't it? We recently took a brief from a client who shall remain nameless, but a really big name brand. And they were actually thinking about their loyalty program as a chief driver acquisition into the business and actually how they were going to use it to attract people from their competitive set. And I was thinking, wow, 15 years ago, this just wouldn't have come up. This wouldn't have been a KPI anywhere, but it's great that programs are getting so high profile that it's actually thinking for acquisition.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And certainly, Pets at Home use their program as a big driver, particularly around the sort of early years of having a puppy or a kitten. It's really important, and that's of course when you get that big expenditure, which
of course. Well, my pug is a huge fan. Edna has her membership. I love the way they personalise it to a very important pet. In my case, my very important pug. I talk about that program loads. It's brilliant at life cycle management. Absolutely fabulous at sort of locking you in during that puppy phase and then moving you forward, a bit like Boots does, with its parenting club, but for pets.
Yeah. Well, we've also, I mean, in fairness, Havas did that work on the original Pets at Home piece. We've been looking at sort of specific projects for them. We've just done one on looking at senior pets, because
Oh,
obviously lots of pets acquired in lockdown.
yeah,
The sort of rate of growth has slowed quite markedly now. So we're thinking about the longer term and how we can support pet parents, as they're
yeah,
like to be called. Ugh. Owners, as I refer to them, through the sort of latter stages of a pet's life, and because actually, that there's quite a lot of challenges that they face, and you need a degree of expertise on hand to sort of help you with some of that. Um, and the last of the pathways was about the power of collective, which is really about how, I guess, partnering can help brands create sort of bigger, better ecosystems in terms of both the benefits they can offer, the ways in which they can reach customers, leveraging programs. It could be all sorts of different things.
yeah,
I mean, Nestle are quite interesting. They tend to build ecosystems as partnerships to cover more of one of the customer's needs, certainly in
yeah,
the Purina world. It's interesting looking at Nike, and they did that partnership with JD Sports
yeah,
just as a thing to acquire more customers to the Nike club, whatever it's called now, I don't know. But I think partners can be I think the old-fashioned way of thinking was very much we have to do everything ourselves. We have to do everything. We can't possibly sort of, you know, work with anybody else because it will dilute our brand. And I
yeah.
just don't think consumers think about like that now. I think the world of collabs and that sort of thing has really changed, and people think it's a really smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And you can benefit from working with a savvy kind of brand that's a good fit for yours. And I think, why wouldn't you? I mean, it
Well,
makes
as
life
you
a
can
lot
imagine,
easier.
we at Mando looked at that part of the
Yeah,
report and went, yay, because obviously we hugely believe in
yeah,
partnerships and,
yeah,
more for less, but through collaboration is a kind of
yeah.
natural way we operate as humans. So brilliant to see it coming to the fore in loyalty. Yeah, that was great. What about the kind of overall three key takeouts? Because I'm sure our
Okay.
listeners will read the report cover to cover, learn it, much as all us sort of loyalty strategists and nerds do. But for those people who are taking a bit of a shortcut through this podcast, what do you think the kind of three most important takeaways are? And that's really difficult because obviously there's so much in the paper.
There is quite a lot in there. I think I think the simplest one is really to never forget that loyalty is both an emotion and a behavior,
Yeah.
and that to be successful, you have to fuel both. Whether that's in equal measure or some more than others, I don't know. You've got to work that out for yourself, guys.
Yeah.
But to have that fullest possible impact, and a bit like that fashion example I gave, that's just not expensive for the brand to do. It's a
Yeah.
darn sight cheaper than manufacturing jumpers from the archive or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Um, but that is the sort of thing where I think, that would have given people an experience that they would never forget, and would have been really easy to do, and would have absolutely fueled that sort of emotional sense of achievement they had. And I kind of go, that's the kind of thinking that can get you to a much better place, I think. So I think loyalty is both things. It is a feeling and it is a behavior, and you have to feel both. Um, and I think the other point then is that really that clients that want to succeed now specifically, you guys are going to have to dig deep
Yeah.
into insight, into your brand, into your kind of collective imagination and creativity to really create something that is distinctive, because the world's awash
Yeah.
with loyalty programs, and consumers are starting to show signs of a little bit of they're kind of a bit bored with it, really. Where's the little bit extra? And I think that's the stuff you have to. Yes, you will have to fulfill the sort of. If we're thinking about the four bonds, you have to fulfill the sort of more rational, functional, financial side of things. But the other part of it, the sort of emotional, social, whatever you want to call it, those are the things where I think you can make much more impact if you're lucky. And I think the other third thing for me, and this really it just really leans into the idea that it's the need to keep evolving. Loyalty is it's not a fixed destination. Loyalty is actually an evolving relationship between two parties, and it always has been. And I think you need to recognize that relationships change all the time. And when they become fixed, they become very dull and predictable. And that's when they possibly fracture. So I think thinking about loyalty as as a relationship rather than just a, kind of one-dimensional thing is really important. So I think probably those things are all interlinked, but those three things I thought were fairly handy.
Brilliant. That's a really good shortcut for everybody. But I do and cannot emphasize enough, read the whole paper. It's really interesting. You can read it on your phone, you can read it while you're commuting. It really is well worth it, particularly for the kind of quotes and takeouts and kind of a real experience that pepper through it. So as we draw to the conclusion of our episode, is there anything else you feel you'd like to share with our listeners today that you feel you haven't covered?
I'd love to encourage, younger people who possibly, haven't thought about the world of loyalty, CRM, whatever we call it nowadays, data-driven marketing as a particularly, something they're particularly focused on. I think so many people, particularly in agencies, younger people have come up through the world of social, for example, which looks really exciting in its own right. It's constantly evolving, lots going on. But I would suggest that you also have a look at the world of loyalty, CRM, one-to-one, all of those things, and embrace kind of what it can offer you, because I think it's going to remain important. It's going to keep changing. It just is another string to your bow, and you may find, a bit like Charlie and I did, that you get into it and you love it, and you become a super nerd who kind of you become part of the crew that sort of know about this stuff and really enjoy it, and sort of you can build a career out of it. I think as we're both showing, and it is immensely enjoyable. It is both creative and business focused, and will stretch your brain in so many ways that I think is immensely enjoyable.
Oh, I think that's a great answer. And yeah, I echo that completely from like my top to my toes. I just think that's it's a brilliant industry. You get to meet such interesting people. And this has just been such a wonderful episode to talk about the programs you've worked on, but brand new research and papers coming out as well. So thank you so much for your time today. If people want to reach out and they want to download the paper or get in touch with people at Ogilvy, I'm guessing the answer is probably LinkedIn and look on the website. So we'll
There's
make
lots
sure.
of things in there.
Brilliant. We'll make sure we put all those links in the show notes for people to kind of so they can get hold of the research and also follow up and look at all those brilliant Ogilvy case studies as well and all those awesome programs. And there's really not much more for me to say other than thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure. That's it from goodbye. Well, it's goodbye from Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV.
Bye.